What is up, everybody? Mauricio Pochettino is officially the manager of the U.S. men's national team. Now they've had a little bit of time to digest the news. I wanted to really go through this. I've broken it down into three different segments with kind of three different sub points within each segment, if you will. So let's jump right in, figure out, break down what the U.S. men's national team is getting in Mauricio Pochettino, how he actually fits the team he is now coaching, and what questions still need to be answered. Starting with the resume. This is obviously a home run. He was in the list of names that at the beginning of this coaching search, I would have categorized as unrealistic. Not quite at the level of Jurgen Klopp, because he's not quite at Jurgen Klopp's level as a manager, and Jurgen Klopp was not going to go back into managing immediately after leaving Liverpool. But he was in the group where you go, I don't think it's going to happen. I highly doubt it, but you got to give him a call and see. And turns out he was interested. It's going to be interesting to hear him talk about more of the reasons why. But you absolutely, positively have to hire Mauricio Pochettino if Mauricio Pochettino wants to go manage your team at a home World Cup in 2 years. The other part of why I thought this was unrealistic and why this is so surprising and such a big deal is he has one tournament in the Gold Cup before the World Cup. There is no World Cup qualifying. There is very little high stakes games his team is going to play before the World Cup. There just isn't that much to do. And so it's going to be quite the transition for somebody who's used to managing at the top of the sport every single day. Because that's not what this is. It is all building up to a month if things go well at the World Cup, right? It is all about 2026 at this point. We'll see what the Gold Cup ends up looking like. But you don't even have the rather regular rhythms of the international game with this job because there's no World Cup qualifying. You have an incredibly difficult time finding high-level opponents to schedule because everybody else is playing UEFA Nations League and CONMEBOL World Cup qualifying and all of these things. This team isn't going to get tested very much, and that was okay with Mauricio Pochettino. That's a huge win for the U.S. men's national team. Second part of this, talked about it after Copa America. You need somebody in this position who is going to get people excited, who is going to unify this fan base heading into that home World Cup. You have to have a selling point and a reason for optimism. You have it. You absolutely positively have it just because Mauricio Pochettino is here. The third part of this that's interesting to me is that you have somebody who should be motivated to do a really good job here. Because if this doesn't go well, after the weird stint at Chelsea and the weird exit, after an uninspiring time at PSG, there are going to be some questions that are going to start to be asked about Mauricio Pochettino and whether he can get back into the highest level of management in the sport if that's what he wants to do. But if this goes well, he leads this team to the quarterfinals, something like that. The consensus is he did a really good job and got more out of them and took them to another level. Then all of a sudden, some other opportunities are going to open up and he can jump back in at the level that he's used to managing at, probably. But that's not a guarantee if this doesn't go well. He has something at stake here, too. The final thing I'll say from the resume standpoint, I'm the biggest Jesse Marsch advocate you're going to find. That's only a slight exaggeration. Yes, I believe the U.S. should have hired him. But the end result, and I know where these two teams are at right now, you take Mauricio Pochettino over Jesse Marsch all day, every day. It took a while to get here. There were plenty of questions and uncertainty along the way. But Matt Crocker ended up with the top choice, the belle of the ball, however you want to describe it. He hit a home run at the end of this. Took a while, but there is no other way to describe this. From a resume standpoint, from an excitement and reputation standpoint, I don't think in a realistic world the U.S. could have done any better. That is just Mauricio Pochettino outside of the team. So let's talk about the fit now and what this is actually going to look like from within the U.S. men's national team context. The thing that is going to keep getting emphasized, and rightfully so, is that Mauricio Pochettino has done his best work at Southampton, at Tottenham, with young, energetic, motivated players trying to get to the next level, trying to prove themselves at the highest level, trying to establish themselves as big-time players in Europe. In the case of Southampton, trying to get the move to the next big club, right? Trying to propel themselves in their career. You look at this roster from an age standpoint, from a club situation standpoint, sounds awfully familiar. This is the kind of stuff that Mauricio Pochettino excels at. Is taking a group like this and elevating them, making them better, getting more out of them. That's a really, really good thing. And to me, the biggest reason why this makes sense, outside of if Mauricio Pochettino wants to manage your team, you say yes, because you're U.S. Soccer. But just from a fit standpoint, outside of his resume, that's the big check mark in the positive box. The second part, they're going to be better to watch. I find it hard to believe it is going to continue to look the same. And yes, that was a big frustration under Greg Berhalter. I would argue unfairly so most of the time. Because they got results. But it wasn't pretty. There's going to be more entertainment value here. That also makes a lot of sense from a U.S. soccer perspective in terms of trying to, again, re-energize the fan base, get fans reconnected, get fans excited heading into 2026, get fans to buy into this team again. The third part is where this gets interesting. Everything Mauricio Pochettino does, or has done in his career, I should say, has been kind of structured around this idea of program building, player development, that work that you can do when you see your players day in, day out, when you have a 38-game season plus, 45 plus games overall in all competitions, maybe 50 if you have a good season. You're playing once, twice a week. That is where you can see what he is best at and see his abilities as a coach. We don't know that is going to translate to the international game. And this also goes back to something that I just mentioned that I want to dive into for a second here. I say this all the time, but it applies to this situation too. Purely from a winning knockout tournament standpoint and having success in knockout tournaments, to me, this is not the best system, strategy, philosophy to have. Now, we don't know exactly what this is going to look like, so it's kind of unfair to just project everything we know on this without giving the possibility that there are going to be some adaptations from Pochettino. But there has to be the balance, the multidimensional aspect, and it is the one of the ever-present questions with this team, who has been playing out of the back, doing it very poorly, and is now going to a manager who wants to be ambitious, maybe not quite as structured in build-up, right? Because there's definitely some high pressing, some more transition in there. And again, we don't know exactly what the balance and breakdown of that's going to be. But he wants his team to be front-footed and ambitious. We have not seen a lot of indications that that is something this U.S. men's national team can do well. That is a concern for me. And does he have the time, with the short international windows, with only seeing these players a few times a year, to get this team where he wants it to be and to execute his vision? Then the second part of that is that vision actually something that's going to lead this team to more success? That is my big concern when it comes to fit. We just don't know who Mauricio Pochettino, the international manager, is. And he kind of has to get this right on the first try, because he's got less than 2 years before all of the judgment is coming with that World Cup. The third part, the questions. They're all kind of built around the same theme, but the first one, can he hold these players accountable? The flip side, or the counter argument to what I laid out before about how, on paper, this looks like the exact team Mauricio Pochettino is perfect to coach, because there's a bunch of young players still looking to improve, and he has done a great job of that in his career, is where did things not go so well? PSG, specifically. Can have conversations about Chelsea. It's just a weird situation. But it didn't seem like he had a lot of control over Neymar and Mbappe, the big stars at PSG. When Emma Hayes took over the women's national team, I said one of the great gifts she is going to bring is that she is one of the very few people on this planet who can simultaneously demand an awful lot from her players, push them, hold them accountable, her word make them suffer, and also be beloved by them. She has this remarkable ability to be both the hard-nosed drill sergeant, the relentless striver for perfection, and a player's coach. It is so hard to strike that balance. We have not seen an indication that Mauricio Pochettino can do that. And that specifically matters with this team, because what is the big conversation, and rightfully so right now? Lack of maturity, not focused enough, getting outworked, all of those things. If these players aren't willing to adapt by themselves, and we've seen no indication that that is going to happen, they have not learned their lesson yet, based off of Copa America, based off of these two friendlies. And specifically when it comes to playing opposition they are better than, and that is what is going to happen for a vast majority of the next 2 years until the World Cup. Can Pochettino force that change that I and many other people who follow this team and care about this team believe needs to happen? Because it doesn't look like it's going to come from the players. Could be wrong on that, just going off of what we've seen so far. Second, in a similar vein, Can he set the tone for this program rather than adapt to it and the culture that already exists? He absolutely did this at Spurs, right? It 100% felt like it was his club, his team, his vision, his culture. Since then, PSG certainly was not molded by him. Chelsea was not molded by him. If anything, he was molded by those clubs. And yes, it's a different world when you're talking about PSG and you're talking about Chelsea compared to Spurs, compared to Southampton. So the answer to this might be yes. But for this to work the way it could, it has to feel more like the Spurs version. It has to feel that unity, that belief. The players are playing for him. They're working toward a common goal. Instead of all the politics that do come with this position that he didn't seem to handle as well at PSG and Chelsea, because that's not what he does. I think that's pretty clear by now. Has he learned enough through those experiences to get this back to something that is more comfortable for him and where he thrives, creating that pro player environment where there's an incredible buy-in and everybody is collectively together in what they're doing? Because that has to be part of this. And then the biggest question of all. I said in the first part, this is a home run, no-brainer, you have to hire him. And I stand by that. Laid out why this could very well work, why this makes sense from a fit standpoint, some of the questions. Ultimately, it comes down to this. How much of a difference can he actually make? And that is not a question about his managerial abilities, his tactical knowledge, any of that. It goes back to those other two questions I just asked. I made this point in 5 Things from the Week, and I want to make it here too. There have been U.S. men's national teams with far less talent, and that's no disrespect to those players, just think we're generally in consensus this is the most talented team the U.S. men's national team has ever had. Talented group of players. Teams have gotten farther in World Cups. Teams have produced more impressive victories. You've got that Confederations Cup run. Outside of becoming the class of CONCACAF for a brief period of time, this group of players has not done anything that any of its predecessors haven't done. They have not taken this program to new heights, which hypothetically, based on their talent, is exactly what they should be doing. I have always believed in the talent of these players. I don't think it's overhyped. Maybe to a certain extent in some parts of the fan base, but generally speaking, I do believe this is one of the 15 to 20 most talented teams in the world that should be getting to a round of 16 in the World Cup. Then you get into a question of, okay, it's that weird balance because quarterfinals probably overachieving, but anything less than the round of 16 is underachieving. I really, truly believe that's where this team is, if you just line up from a talent standpoint. Right now, this team is not, it's the most talented. It is not the best team in its own region. And for the first time, I'm really starting to wonder if this team is ever going to get to where I believe it can. And that has a lot to do with the players, with the mentality piece, and what we've seen recently at Copa America and coming out of Copa America. The individual results in friendlies aren't that big of a deal. But it becomes a much bigger deal when that is your response to crashing out of Copa America after the disastrous series of events, specifically Tim Weah's red card, that led to that. It is all showing a pattern that has developed before. This is not new. This team shows up ready to go when they play the best teams in the world. They have not consistently done what they are supposed to against teams that are close to them or worse than them. And say what you will about Greg Berhalter, he won trophies. That's part of this too. That can't go away because they did figure out how to do that part for a little bit, and obviously things have not been good recently. But I don't believe any manager. That's why I said this is not specific to Pochettino or his managerial abilities or his tactical knowledge. I'm not convinced any manager can change this by themselves if the players aren't willing to hold themselves accountable, hold each other accountable, and demand more of each other and say this is not good enough. Maybe Greg Berhalter, and this is part of the reason Berhalter was fired, is that it was too comfortable. To me, that was one of the biggest reasons why he had to go. How uncomfortable does Mauricio Pochettino actually make it? We're going to have to wait and find out. But ultimately, here's where we're at. There's a guy from Wisconsin who has those guys right up north playing their guts out for him and making the U.S. men's national team look bad and those players look bad in the process. What are they going to do about it? Pochettino's here. They're running out of excuses because this is a easily top 15 manager in the world and a team that I still believe has a lot of talent. You put those things together, his track record, this should be a smashing success. But there are plenty of things that have to change in order for that to happen, and Mauricio Pochettino can't do that on his own. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you next time.